Let's go to the first one of these. The economy is the #1 issue in this election year. How would you describe your economic philosophy, and what is the best economic policy to create wealth and prosperity for the most people? And let's start this with 2 minutes from Austin.
Okay, I like to define my philosophy, my economic philosophy, as laissez-faire, the ultimate laissez-faire. I often refer to myself as a liberal, or classical liberal, in the classical sense. And I believe that free markets create a system where people have an opportunity to rise out of their classes. So if you take a look at some of the eras of the United States when we were the most free, one of the eras that I like to point at is what they call the Gilded Age, where the United States was on a gold standard. This was the time of Grover Cleveland. Some people like to say that this was the time of robber barons, but we actually had the growth of the beginning of the growth of the middle class in the United States after the Civil War. So when I think about what kind of economic system I think provides the most for the most amount of people, I think that free market capitalism is not only an efficient system, but it's also a moral system, because you can start as an immigrant here with nothing and build and build and build to become middle class or upper middle class or even a billionaire. My family's, they are all immigrants. I think this is an immigrant nation. And they came with nothing, and they made a life for themselves. And I sort of emulated that myself. After college, I was totally broke, and I moved from a farm in Missouri to Manhattan with absolutely nothing. And I went to auditions, and I wrote plays, and I was very entrepreneurial, and I was able to create a career for myself. So when I think about what sort of solutions we might need to go forward, I think that deregulating our economy, looking at options where we can give incentives to business owners to create more jobs by lowering their tax rates. I think that that's a good way to go. And both President Obama and Mitt Romney agreed last night in the debate that we need to do things like lowering our capital gains taxes and find solutions that are more free market to stimulate our economy rather than pumping money directly into it, which is a Keynesian fallacy.
Okay, thank you. JP.
Keynesian fallacy, you're busting out the lingo, man. That's awesome. I more or less agree with everything that Austin said, but I think that there's an important contrast that also needs to be made, not between myself and Austin, but myself and progressive, or people that want a more controlled economy, which is that my father, we're talking about a nation of immigrants, my father came from the mountains of Spain. I mean, a dirt poor village, had no money. His father died before he was born. He was, there was no opportunity for him whatsoever. There was no chance that he was possibly going to make it out. He didn't have any family business that he could turn to, nothing. He and his mother fled, a widow, fled to Buenos Aires. So they fled National Socialism in Spain, and they arrived at National Socialism in Argentina. Now, as many of you know, National Socialism in Argentina wasn't a very stable economy. And it most certainly was not a good opportunity for somebody to rise from poverty and to come up. But he managed to get out. He went to medical school. He went to one of the best medical schools. And he decided that he was going to make a life for himself in the United States. And part of the decision that he had made so that he could come to the United States was he was working for the U.S. Information Agency as a librarian. And he was teaching himself English. And he started to understand what this American dream was, that this thing that he had always been told that he would never be able to achieve. He saw what that opportunity was and he went for it. And that's why I'm here. He met my mother in New York City. They got married, they moved to Connecticut, they lived in Stamford, yuppie town, and they thrived in a free market where he could start his own business. And as you know, doctors are small business owners. Affording that economic opportunity, that economic freedom, is the best way we can help immigrants and people living in poverty rise above their situation. And we're going to continue talking about that as we move forward.
I'm sure we'll have a lot more to say about that. Okay, Anna.
When I think about the economy and deregulation, I think about our state of economy right now. Deregulation led to where we are today. Predatory lending. The government did not regulate what the banks were doing. They were able to do, Wells Fargo was basically called out by a whistleblower who said that they were doing something that they referred to as ghetto loans, where they would purposely look for minority groups, Hispanics who don't speak English perfectly, and they would trick them into subprime mortgages. You need a government agency that regulates that kind of behavior. And when I think about the economy and I think about taxes, I mean, we have the last 12 years to look at as a case study. Okay, the Bush administration cut taxes. That should have created incentives for job creation here in the United States. But what we saw was that people were shipping jobs overseas. When I think about a successful economy, I think about the Clinton administration. Now, Clinton raised taxes on corporations in 1993. Okay, he raised the top income earners tax rate from 31% to 39%. At the same time, during his term, how many jobs did he create? 22 million jobs. And some people might argue that those jobs were government jobs, but 20 million of those jobs were actually private sector jobs. So he did not deter corporations and companies from creating jobs here in the United States at all. But when we have this ridiculous argument about we need to decrease taxes, no problem, we need to decrease taxes to create incentives here in the United States, we've been decreasing taxes. And these corporations have been hoarding the money or sending their jobs overseas for cheap labor, and we haven't seen it benefit our economy whatsoever.
Can I make a quick rebuttal?
Let me open that up. I'm glad that we're...
I want 2 rebuttals.
All right, well, why don't we go to that? We have 3 minutes for rebuttals, so what I'd like to have you do is sort of engage and open.
Okay, I just want to make a really quick point. She's talking about Wells Fargo, tricking people into subprime loans. What is the incentive for a lender or someone who is working at a housing company to trick someone into a loan? Why would I want to trick you into a loan so that if I think you're going to default? The only way that I, as a lender, would ever want to give someone money is if I thought it was a sure thing. What makes it a sure thing? Stimulus. So if the government's going to come in and bail me out, then I am going to go in there and have predatory loans. So the problem is not that the incentive is to go and trick people into loans. The problem is that the lenders know that they're going to get bailed out if they make a mistake. That's what I like to say.
Yeah, let me just jump in.
And the other thing, hold on,
I have to jump in. I just have to jump in because I think... Yes, just very quickly, Austin actually makes an excellent point, and I think that's what the major problem is with our political system right now. The banks, Wall Street, they are in cahoots with our federal government, and part of the reason why is because they can campaign, they can give unlimited amounts of money through rulings like Citizens United to politicians. So if the banks are in trouble, if they're about to face bankruptcy, they know that the government is going to bail them out, and that's a huge problem. And at the end of the day, what happens to the people who took out those mortgages? They go bankrupt, they get foreclosed on, and it's over for them. Who's looking out for the everyday American like us in the room right now?
I'm so curious. Citizens United was only recently decided, and yet the economic fallout occurred far before that. How were they possibly able to influence government that way? What possibly grew government to the point where it would have that kind of an impact on lending? Well, actually, Congress had passed laws incentivizing this kind of lending. They had basically told banks, you need to give bad loans to people who are poor, who might not be able to pay you back. If they can't pay you back, don't worry, we got this. That is something that government did. Now, it was based on an idea that housing is the best way to make sure that our economy is stable. That is a mistaken policy, obviously.
Conservative policy installed by George W. Bush.
Not installed by George W. Bush. Not installed by George W. Bush. Installed by Bill Clinton, actually, but continued by George W. Bush. But here's an important thing. Bush didn't feel like he could actually campaign as a proper conservative because he wasn't a proper conservative. He introduced a new term. Do we all know what that term is for that kind of conservative? Can you say it with me? Compassionate conservatism. And that was the assumption that conservatism itself wasn't compassionate, but it certainly can be. And again, we're going to get into that. I realize that I'm running out of time. So.
Okay, we have a couple more seconds. Austin, I think, baton passed to you.
Okay, yeah, no, I was just going to agree with almost everything he said there. The Citizens United case, of course, was about free speech. You know, it's an issue of free speech on if you own your property and you would like to give your property away to someone else, why is it that the gun in the room needs to take a step in and say, oh no, you can't do that, you can't give money to that certain campaign. Even if you believe in this cause, we're going to come in and we're going to use force to stop you from doing that. I think Russ Feingold is downstairs somewhere. We have the McCain-Feingold reforms. And the McCain-Feingold, they were totally against this decision of free speech. And you have to ask yourself, you know, what is it that is so wrong about me taking my money and giving it to a cause that I believe in? Why does there need to be a limit on that?
May I jump in?
We're going to have to move on, but I have a feeling in the next set of questions we can come back to these.
I'm sending smoke signals, Tonto style.